Welcome to Deborah Marie Brain Plasticity Podcast.
This is Deborah Marie, a co-host, and her name is Valerie Root. And she's assisting me in this to keep me structured, to be able to have a series that you will enjoy about all sorts of wonderful things in this world and sad things. And again, it's about brain plasticity and other neurological illnesses, how to get help in various other ways, and also to learn that I do art to help foundations and hospitals to earn money. And I've been doing it since 2011, and I'm very proud of that.
Let's get into it. Today we are going to just let Deborah tell us a summary of her life, because on this journey you're not going to know unless she tells you, right? So Deborah, give us a summary of your life up to now.
Well, y'all have about 2 or 3, 4 years, I says, because then you're going to really know me. But we're going to have to kind of wean it down. But I will do some key points. One is that I was at 6 months old. I went with my parents and my family, older brothers and sisters. I was number 7, and we lived in Germany, and I lived there till I was about 4 years old. And during that particular time, it was Cold War, and during that particular time also there were maneuvers, and so there was a lot of noise and there was a lot of transition. So believe it or not, I have PTSD from that young child event, to where my father had to go on these maneuvers. So then I'm going to take you back to where I grew up, and where I grew up was out by the airport in Atlanta, Georgia, in this little town that we call Happyville, which is Haverhill, Georgia. And everything was going well. We had a regular house that was a military house, but my father really had served in one of the worst wars of Korean War, and he after he got out of service, he could not adjust, and he drank too much, and guess what he did? He left Deborah Marie, and when she was very young, and the whole family, and disappeared. And so that was trauma. And then I did quite well in school. I hate to tell you, I was a bookworm. A's, quite a bit. And bookworm, did music, did Spanish, advanced Spanish. And then I went in high school, that's what it is. And I played in the band, and I also was a majorette, if anybody knows what that is. But anyway, so then I get out of school. And when you get out of school, you're supposed to go work or go to college or whatever. I had the grades for college, but I didn't have the wherewithal on how to get there. I didn't have any guidance. And so I became I hate to say it, tried to be a secretary, and I couldn't type worth nothing, because you know what? I could not type until computers came around. Couldn't type at all. It was, so what are you going to do? And then when you typed, you only made $3 an hour or $2 an hour. It was horrible. And so women a lot of times did get married and have husbands. The evolution of being the free woman hadn't gotten there totally yet. So I went out and I became a lineman, electrical lineman. I became a cable installer. I climbed telephone poles. I did the world of women's work. And there was one time, and I just got to tell you, this is funny. I was up there pulling wire and everything, and the next thing I looked down, and there's just all these men around my area looking at me, and I'm thinking, what? Can I cuss? Well, I will say, what the fuck are they looking at? You know, I'm this skinny little thing and stuff. So I went back to my job and I just let them leave. And a guy, really big guy, who was a bricklayer, came over at the end of the day and he said to me, he says, you know why everybody was around there? What do you think?
Because you was the only female.
I was the only female, but he says, you are the littlest female I have ever seen pulling wire and a big guy like me, and I'm laying bricks, construction. It's very intimidating. He says, we're having a hard time on this job site coping with you, doing all of this stuff.
And I'm sure you outdid them all, didn't you?
And I was good. Yeah, I was very good at it because, and then these little hands right here, I could get into intricate places and stuff like that the big guys couldn't do. So they always sent me to all those little areas and things like that. So from there, my boss sent me to journeyman school, and I'm sitting there doing all this math and journeyman school. You men out there know what that is. Top dog of the construction area for electrical. So I was doing very well on math, and I went, why aren't I going to engineering school? So I didn't know how to get there. So I'm walking down the road one day in Sandy Springs, if anybody knows where that is in Georgia, and I see this sign and it says The Link, counseling. I didn't know what counseling was. All I know is that I was treading my wheels at the age of about 22, and I didn't know my direction, and I knew I could not pull wire forever or even cable install, climb telephone poles, go under people's houses when I'm 40. And I thought, well, I'm going to go in this store and figure out what this thing is. And sure enough, it was a counseling center, and I started off with a therapist, and got me into going to night school and got my direction going. And so I went to work. I helped my mother. I had a sick sister. I helped her, and then I studied and went at night. And then I got my first engineering job, and I'll have to tell you a funny story about that, is that I kind of taught myself into this place. And it was in Roswell, Georgia. It was rinky-dinky town at that time. And a year later, maybe it might have been 2 years later, my boss told me, he says, Deborah, we almost let you go. And I said, really? And he says, but you know why we didn't?
What?
Because I would stay on my own time. I wanted that job so bad. I would stay an extra hour, sometimes 30 minutes to an hour. I don't think it was longer than that. And on my own time. And I made sure that I had drafted my drawings the way they're supposed to be. And I did it on my own pay. I mean, not there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be good. And I wanted to learn this. And they figured out I didn't know as much as what I did know in the beginning. And so that's why they almost let me go. But those extra hours, because sometimes, and I'm telling you this a little bit, sometimes in life you have to do a little bit more than what you're paid for to get where you want to go.
That's right.
Especially, which I skipped a little part. When I said my daddy left, I forgot to tell you, he threw us in poverty, so I had lived in poverty. I didn't have things to eat. I didn't have meals appropriate. I was what they call latchkey child, but it wasn't that. It was plain out. I didn't have nobody. I will go in more depth with this somewhere else in the story, but I just want to go into that. I came from poverty once he walked out that door. We never had anything. Um, and it was 10 years old starting working. So jump back up. So I go into engineering school and I'm studying and all of that stuff. And then I'm working for this company and I'm doing quite well and all of this. And then I'm helping my mother because I bring that up because we're talking poverty. So I felt dedicated to helping my mother. And I felt dedicated to help my sick sister that I had who had a daughter. And so I did all these things, and I have no idea how I did it in my 20s. And all I can tell you is I look back now is that I was so busy doing that. I think that's why I never found anybody during my 20s and never married during my 20s. But in my mind, I'm going to be 29 and I'm going to meet Mr. Right and I'm going to have my children. And by that time, I'm going to be through some of my degree and up and higher, and I'm going to be doing really well. Well, 29 came around, I didn't have Mr. Right, but I did have my own house. I saved my money, and I will tell you how I saved my money sometime during this pod. And I saved my money and I bought my own house. It was 1,500 square feet, two-car garage, quarter lot. Which is a nice little lot, and it was in a cute little small neighborhood, and I got turned down. This is another thing back in those days. I got turned down by a couple of banks, and they were males, bankers, and they said, "You know why we're not going to give you a loan?"
Because you're a woman.
Yes, but take it a little bit further. If you get sick, who's going to pay the bill?
Oh, yeah.
Now, my brother said to me, I'm single. I bought a house. Now, if I get sick, who's going to pay the bill? They never asked me. And he says, that doesn't work, Deborah. He says, so that made me go to one more bank, and the woman was a woman banker. And she said, I got a woman for you, and she's with Banker Bank. And she came to my house, and she walked me through the paperwork and everything, and I bought my first house. And it took women, helping women. And that's where I learned from that point on, to help women.
I love it.
In business.
Yes.
And I did in drafting and engineering all the way, even if a woman or young girl was a secretary, if she wanted to learn a spreadsheet and she didn't know how, I'd say to her, you want to stay after work on your own time? Now look at that. Deborah goes back to the day where she stayed as a draftsman on her own time. And I was a manager, and I said, if you want to stay on your own time, I said, you want to make more money one day, I'll teach you how to do a spreadsheet. I'll teach you how to do a database. And I says, but it's on your own time. It's on your own initiative. She did. And she became very good and stuff. And a couple of years later, she left, and she got a what?
A better job.
That's right.
Higher pay.
That's right.
Because she stayed after. She did the work.
She did the work. And she stayed after. She contacted me after she got that job, which I knew people that that helped, kind of indirectly helped her get that job. And she contacted me. She wanted to take me out to eat, and she thanked me. She had a new husband that was coming along. She had 2 children already, and her boss had bought her children for Christmas bicycles because she couldn't afford it, and everything. And then she says, but it all happened because of Deborah Marie. I helped her. And this is been my life. I helped my mom, I helped my sister, I helped her. I've helped a lot of people. Then I go in and stuff, and I can tell you about small businesses I help with CAD work. I also help people who just needed databases in their business and on the side and help them. I gave them advice, and then all the time, let's go back to it. What am I doing? I'm helping my mother. I'm helping my sister. Is there a man in my life? We'll go there someday, but yeah, men are beginning to come in my life because guess what? I found out when you get a house and you're a woman, they like you. So, anyway, and so from there, I eventually got my degree. It was a long road. I struggled, but the struggle was very rewarding later on because of the best thing about my project management and the work that I did is that from the time that I was able to, they gave me a raise and put me in a management job without a degree, is that, but they knew I was going to school and everything, is that I was focused on the little guy that didn't make as much and helped them, all the way up to engineers who have graduated that did not understand engineering and the process and how to make projects work, up to the actual experienced engineer who didn't have a good overview. And I just somehow developed a very good overview of project management. And I think it was from coming from the ground up and working with all the people and even the women in the office and uh, vice presidents, presidents, and everything. And one thing I also did is, and that was a president's daughter came into a company one time and she almost worked there. And she says, you're the only one that doesn't get upset about me being the president's daughter and you treat me normal. And I said, we both go to the bathroom the same way. Isn't that funny? I said, so what does it matter?
Yep.
I says, you have a higher education, but you're still in here learning from me. So what does it matter? And I said, so I never felt like that people were above me or whatever. And I'm I don't want to tell my age. I'm getting of age, and I think what it was is I didn't idolize people. I didn't have these big people in my eyes that I thought they were just glamorous and all this stuff, and I had to idolize what they wore, what they did, and all that stuff. No. What I focused on was not the tabloids, not this gossip, and not all that stuff. What I focused on is doing a good life, helping people in various ways, and then finally I got to a point to where, why did my father leave a 5-year-old, 6-year-old girl that he loved, in that range, 7 I saw, maybe some. And I started going to I heard he was an alcoholic. And I started going to AA and Al Anon meetings tremendously in between all the other things that I was doing. And so by the time my father contacted me and we got together in my 40s, I understood military wise because I studied military just out of being a playing army with my brothers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were older than me, but I enjoyed it. I was a tomboy, and that's probably why I got in engineering too. And so um, I studied history with wars and various things, and then I got to know him, and he told me that um, he called it Deborah can never get involved with white liquor, and what that meant was vodkas and gin, and his favorite was vodka. And he says I was drinking it in the morning, and I couldn't live without it, and I just left and couldn't care less about my family. I met my father. I found out through him alcoholism is what took him away from the family in his disruptive area of the military. And he told me a little bit about his military life, which kind of, I heard little whispers about from my older brothers and stuff about some of the things he did, flipping a coin on their bed to make sure they made it up right and various things, and things like that, he was pretty strict. So I didn't experience that. I was too young. So anyway, so I met a different kind of man. He was nice. He was fun. He was interesting. And we would sit at the beach and we would talk and discuss things and just laugh. And I found out also, now this is very interesting, about young childhood life. I just got through telling you a few earlier, is that I lived in Germany, and he was with the Cold War and stuff. He was in engineering and also, and it was a signal corps, and he used to sit me on his big drafting desk, and I would sit there and play as a young child. Now, you have to understand those desks are huge back in the day. And so it was big enough for me to sit there and watch him, and he would be doing his drafting. And so it's amazing,
yeah,
how
you picked it up.
I picked it up.
Mm-hmm.
And never, never knew that until he told me, that I'd sit there real quiet, and then I got a little bit older, about 3. I'd sit in a little chair and wait on him while he's there drafting and everything. So, yeah. Life really goes around a lot. So you'll learn that with my story. So I graduated. I'm not going to go into male issues because that's not of interest right at the moment. I shouldn't call it male issues, marriages. It's not an interest at the moment. And I did say marriages because you'll find out how silly it is because I have opinions on several of them and stuff, how they came about, and especially the first one. But anyway, I know you're sitting and waiting and going, why is she leaving out of here marriages? Well, it'll be interesting. So then I graduated. My income doubled. And I was very proud of it. I had finally made it and everything, and I've got a great engineering job. And from there, I had gone into environmental work, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I did air quality and water, and then during that time period, I had my own sailboat with husband number two, and we went out in the ocean and went up the intercoastal and various things, and then and traveled all over the country, and but I stayed with various engineering work, and we can go into that too. You will find I'm very diverse with my engineering background. If we want to discuss that, again, I want you to focus on. I've worked with little businesses all the way up to multi corporations, and then when this is where the sad part comes in, and it's kind of hard to talk about it because after I took care of my mother, after I took care of my sister, after everything gone through, after going through school, after finally a couple of marriages, it was a sad situation. The second one is that I was really happy about where I was. I was really happy that I was working with engineers of my peers who were males who were telling me that I was going to be the next vice president of the company, and I was going to take over this woman vice president job. And I mean, after all these years, I really got, it shocked me when I worked with some project managers and some of the strongest project managers, and would say, Deborah, you are something else, when watching you work. And then some that had been with the company that I was working for years and said that, wow, you have, it's the word tenacity. You have strength, tenacity. I went into the general manager's office and one day, and I just go knocking on the door. I bypassed his secretary, and I said, I've been here several years. I think it was going on 3 years. And I said to him, and he says, yes, ma'am. And I said, hey, I'm Deborah Crook, and I went and shook his hand and everything. And I says, do you realize I'm the only engineer that's female on this floor? And I says, it's time to start bringing in some women on this floor. And I said, there's just mainly secretaries. And I said, and he looked at me, he couldn't get over it. And he says, boy, are you German or German descent? And I says, no. But he says, you have attributes of a German. He says, I can't believe you bypassed my secretary, knocked on my door, and sat down here like we both know each other and stuff. And he said, I've heard of you, but he said, I can't get over it. And what you want to tell me about is I need to bring more women into this division. And I said, yeah, you do. And guess what?
He did.
He did, and the guys afterwards, yes, they started bringing more women engineers into that division area. And over the years, and it's just unfortunate. Now, I'm doing really well. Project management, making some bonuses. And anybody heard that song by, oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes Benz? My friends all got some. Janis Joplin. Well, anyway, I got a bonus. And it was a very nice bonus. And I went, okay, it's time for me to get a good car, a nice car, and everything. And I went to Mercedes, and then I went to Audi, and then I got them playing on who's going to I'm going to purchase from, and getting deals and getting deals and going back and forth. I mean, I really had them going. And then finally, Mercedes calls me up, and when I was headed toward Audi, I think I was going to buy Audi, and then Mercedes calls me up and says, "We've got a deal for you." And so I go to Mercedes, and they did have a deal for me, and then they went, you're hard, you're difficult." He said, "You just, he says, you're probably one of the hardest person I have been able to make a deal with." And I says, "Well, I had a boss who was an engineer who taught me how to buy cars." And I says, I I'm not going to walk out this door at the price that you got on that sticker." And I says, "Because it just deflated as soon as I go drive it off the lot." And I said, "So let's make a deal." So anyway, I drove off with a Mercedes. And so I had my wish from that song that nobody else helped me. I did it, and stuff. And so it felt really good, and I started driving it to work, and stuff, and everything. And nobody was impressed. I don't think. I didn't make a big deal out of it, but I'm going silent because I started having this pain, and I have some really ugly pictures that I'm going to show you later on in this pod, on the side of my head, and the look. And I didn't know where it came from, and didn't know how to deal with it. And doctors didn't know if it was seizures, didn't know if it was whatever it was. But I had two female doctors that were trying to get in touch with this neurologist and tell him that it had to do, one, with hormones. I was in my 50s, and it had to do with a migraine. And one of the doctors, who was my primary care doctor, she had only been in as a doctor for 2 years. 2 years. I want you to remember that number.
Okay.
Why?
She was a newbie.
Yes. And she looked at me one day. I was taken to her office just to show her my face, what's going on. And she went, "Oh my gosh, I've read about this. I studied it. I studied migraines with women because they have them a lot." And her name was Dr. Kelly. And she said, "But I've never seen it in person. You have a rare hemiplegic migraine." And I says, "Please tell the neurologist, get me some help." So she got on the phone immediately. So I went back to her a few days later, and I was having a hard time at work due to these attacks would come in the morning, and I wouldn't get to work till about 10 because I had to rest a little bit more from the attack and the pain. And I told my boss, I says, "I can't help it." So rumors were going around, jealousy, that I was drinking on and I couldn't make it in. The stupidity that people do to you. Maybe because you drive a Mercedes, heck, I don't know. So anyway, or you're just plain out good at your job, I think. And the other thing is, I'm going to tell you one other thing. All these years, is as difficult as my life was, I always went into work happy. I never, if I went into work and I was not happy, I quit that job and I found me another job. Because if you don't like where you're working, you might as well not work there, because you're there a long time, more than you are anywhere else. And so, but I was always happy. I'd go in, hey, this person, that person, or, hello, talk shop people, secretaries, anywhere, anybody I'd say hello to. I do that at my house now. I will have a tendency, if I sit out on the porch, I say hello to everybody who goes by. And so, anyway, so this neurologist didn't help me. I had to go to Johns Hopkins. I don't want to go too much into that because it's a very sad story, and I want to move on and just do breeze. And I go to Johns Hopkins, and they said, you got this hemiplegic migraine. They should have known this when they were giving you all these variations of medicines down in Atlanta. And let me tell you, I had medicines. I've had everything from psych medicines to every kind of, I think, migraine medicine. And I even passed out at work at a meeting in front of everybody. And it was embarrassing, but the other people in the room got in trouble, and it caused them to go to compliance because they didn't handle the situation appropriately. They should have called an ambulance, and they didn't. They just sent me home. And so it became a very big issue there. But anyway, so I come back. I go to the top doctor of the top hospital, and he said, he had me sign something, and he said that he had trigger point injections. Well, I didn't know what trigger point injections were. And I also got to tell you, I trusted doctors at that point. I trusted the name DOCTOR. Doctors, medical doctors. I thought they knew what they were doing in their life. I mean, I held them on a high pedestal because during my school of engineering, we were also taught that, doctors are here and engineers are right underneath because we have to study so much math and everything. So we're the cream of the crop, but the doctors were above us. But more than that, I have never had a doctor, if I ever broke my arm or whatever, I did break my arm, but if I ever had anything, I never had a doctor that was stupid. Mm-hmm. So, and I didn't know about trials at that time. And so I signed this paper about trigger points, and I didn't know there's 20 of us. He didn't tell us. Didn't tell me nowhere on that piece of paper, and I got the piece of paper at home. That one day I go in, and he's doing his thing, sitting at the the computer and all of that stuff, asking me questions and typing, and I couldn't say a word at some point. And he goes, when did this start happening? He freaked out, just totally freaked out. And I'm like, I think he should have known this, I'm just looking at him, I'm thinking, he's supposed to know more than I do, and he's asking me, when did this start happening to me?
What started happening?
I couldn't talk.
Okay.
Couldn't talk. Nothing verbally could come out. Now, you've heard me talk this whole time. Nothing could come out. So he pulls me up, drags me across the hall, doesn't give a nurse, sits me down into a medical chair, gets out those big needles that he does these trigger point things, and they're very thin, but they're long, that he's doing. He's giving me all these shots and everything. And he's so excited during all of this. He's doing my orbitals and stuff. And then he has to jump. And he doesn't have a nurse. So he has to work with my head and stuff without a nurse, somebody holding this stability with the head. And he's going from orbital to orbital, and then he's going down, and then he hits right below my cerebellum into my spinal cord. I knew something happened. He quit. And he just put the shot down, and I knew something happened. I didn't know what. He reacted weird. And he just left me there. And I started crying. And I laid on the bed that was in there because I thought if I cried, he'd come back in there. And his nurse walked by the door, and I thought maybe she'd come in there. But they didn't. So after a few minutes, all I could think about, because I was just flight or fright. I did
fight or flight.
Yes, and I wasn't gonna fight. And flight came to me, and I thought I've got 10 minutes to get home because something's wrong with me. I didn't think about anything else except for getting in my car and going home. I didn't think about ERs. I didn't think about anything because I'm at the top doctor of this hospital, neurologist. I didn't understand why he quit working with me. I didn't understand anything. I was very disoriented. I don't even know how I got home. And I went upstairs and I sat down on my bed for just a minute, but it ended up being longer than a minute because I passed right out. And my husband came home and he woke me up. And I was contorted. And I couldn't talk well in my head. And I was moving around like this and just going just like this. Just couldn't get words out, couldn't. And he went, "Oh my gosh, what happened to you?" And he grabs me and he tries to hold on to me. And then he takes me over to the wall because they were different kind of cell phones then, to call this doctor. And he puts me up against the wall, and I'm just banging my head against the wall, and my body is all on the right side, and I'm banging my head up against the wall. And he calls this doctor, and the doctor answered, and he says, "Take her to another neurologist." And he hung up. And so that day changed my life forever. I got a brain injury, left hemisphere and right hemisphere, chemically induced. Just so happened 13% of the population is allergic. At that time, there's a new, from what I understand, there's a new version of solomendrol. But 13% of the population is allergic to solomendrol. And solomendrol is supposed to be used for epidurals for somebody who's having a baby and was not supposed to be around the brain. And that's what he was using in his mix of medicine. And I had a major reaction. And I ended up in a Shepherd Brain and Spinal Institute, and going there, and I met Dr. Darrell Lewis Kalin, and he looks at me, and it was, I'm quite sure I have the date right, January the 10th, 2010. And he said, "Nobody told me she was this bad off. I would have had her in here sooner. The event happened in October, and I had to wait for him till January." A neurologist that I had, the old one, I went to him, and then another, I went to my gynecologist. Now, who goes to your gynecologist for help? But he had known me since I was 19, and stuff. And we always thought, one day I was going to have a baby and he was going to deliver and stuff, but it didn't happen. But anyway, he cried and just cried and held me. He says, "Who did this to you?" And Amin had to tell the story. He just sit there. He had to tell the story. And next thing you know, he's fumbling through his medical book and he's looking at all my movements and my spasms and all this other stuff. And he's going, "I'm not a neurologist." And he goes, and he's got all these great certificates around his floor, all over the wall, because he was the top baby doctor in Georgia, never had any kind of complaints or anything. And his name was Dr. Richard Taylor. He's still around. I can tell you wonderful stories about him. Anyway, so he finally says, "I know a guy." Well, guess what? He was my neurologist earlier. And he says, "I'm going to call him up, and between the two of us, we got to refer you into the hospital next door, which is Shepherd Brain and Spinal." That is how the series happened. You couldn't just walk into Shepherd. You have to have referrals by doctors, and you have to be in the know. And these two doctors were in the know. And then I had a cognitive test in between all of that because I had a psychologist. And she saw me and she went, "Oh my gosh, what has happened to you?" And she was also devastated because she just saw me 2 weeks before because I was having these migraine things. And then she saw me in this very dysfunctional state. And so she got me to the cognitive test, which at the cognitive test I was told that I was only going to be there for 4 hours. And the woman comes in and she says, "We're going to need you to be here all day, and then we're going to need to have you here tomorrow. Something seriously is wrong with you, and I'm going to have somebody take you to go get lunch, and you come back." And so I came back, and there were things that, as an engineer, I should have been able to have done. So in between these tests, periodically, I just cried. It was, I knew with this cognitive test at that point, really knew something was wrong with me. Numbers, you could do calculus, algebra, do radiuses, all sorts of things, project management, various, just was flying. In some ways, somewhere in my head, flying by. But in the middle of it was, I can't add 1 and 1 and read. And yeah, my life changed. So Dr. Kalin was having a difficult time because this wasn't a bleed out. And so he started with medicines and stuff. And then he had this certain way, I still remember it, of looking at me, swung back on his doctor chair, leaned up against the wall, and just think, what am I going to do with this woman? My sister was in the room. and my body would just move on one half. And so he started me in these neuroscience classes, and they found that I didn't feel anything and stuff like that on certain areas. And of course, they found out I had left hemisphere, right hemisphere damage, and all that stuff. If you want to what's it called? Hopscotch?
Hopscotch.
Yes, hopscotch with children and stuff like that. I couldn't even do it. They put it in front of me, and I had to just look at it. And then I'd put one foot in the next foot, and then I'd go to the next square, but it took me a while. By the time of 2 months with that neuroscience, I was able to do that. I was able to do a couple of things, and I was able to scramble eggs. But I still wasn't able to do engineering. I still was in elementary books, and I still was doing Dr. Seuss on the loose. Dr. Seuss books and stuff starting all over. And then I go in there, and he goes, Deborah, I've done everything. And I'm laying on the bed, and I'm still moving freely. He says, I've done everything I can think of. And I'm going to this class that's trying to get me to breathe normal because my heart was off and my breathing was off. I was going to mindful classes. I was going through the whole program. I mean, everything to put me back together. And I called myself Humpty Dumpty, and they did write an article about that and stuff. But I started crying. I says, please don't give up on me. I just looked at him. I says, please don't give up on me. And he sat there and he tapped and he swung back on his chair again like he always did with every visit. And sat and looked and stuff. And he says, I'm going to try one more thing. And that one more thing was a medicine, but it did it. It did it. It was the most, few weeks later, the most unbelievable moments of my life. That I still had the hemiplegic migraine periodically. I still was running to the hospitals, and I got scars to show all of that all over myself. Looks like a junkie there and stuff. But yeah, he was able to give me talking, walking in that body movement calm. And if I do not take that regimen of medicine all the time, morning and night, I have morning, lunch, night, and bedtime, that will come back. And I have a lot of problems with hospitals, with doctors, with people that don't understand it and who have been in ER rooms and they don't think I need to have that medicine. And next thing you know, all of those functions can come back within 24 hours. I can go into seizures. I can, because that was beat my head up against the wall was a seizure. So anyway, and then I came in with a bead one day. I was able to walk. For some reason, I got to the bead store and I don't remember. And so he just, Deborah, start doing that. So at that point in time, I started doing that. The next thing you know, my husband decided to change the job, and we were going out of the country. And he goes, "Wow," he says, "go out of the country. It's going to make you, force you into new environments. It's going to make your brain go through gyrations you've never gone." And I says, "Well, my brain's hurting," but he kept telling me about what's going on. And so then everything. So the bottom line with all of it, I've lived in New Zealand, I've traveled in Australia, I've lived in Canada twice, I've lived in Germany, and I've traveled back and forth. I learned how to travel by myself. I came up here to Louisville because he transferred from Atlanta, Georgia, up to Fraser Brain and Spinal Rehab, and he's the director there. And I've been coming here since, and then I moved here for him. But the whole gamut of what he was pushing me to go to these countries, to do this bead work, and just continuously. And so I did it. I mean, I went to bead shops all over the place and got beads and just kept doing them, kept looking at magazines and kept designing stuff and just going into a whole genre. That's brain plasticity. I did not even know. He didn't talk about it because you know what? The guy who discovered it had not at all been acknowledged about that. I was in either my 7th or 8th year where he finally got a neurological award of brain plasticity. And at that time, I had gone through the Fraser Neuroscience, and my engineering came back. Not to work, because I have severe pain with this hemiplegic trigeminal neuralgia, and I can show you some ugly films about that and how bad it looks and how painful it is. But it was amazing. Once I learned that word, I started studying it and started studying it, learning about it, found that man, started reading books about strokes. Once I was capable of doing things, I just started like a sponge and collecting it and just doing everything I could to, and the whole time, I didn't think about it being brain plasticity. I just knew that I wanted to get better. I knew I would never cure my brain injury, but I just knew every new thing that I did, from the jewelry to the repousse, to the leather work, to the woodwork, to the resin work, to the pendant that I've designed, to the poem book that I'm writing, to my personal life book I'm writing, to a photography book that I have in mind that's going to be quite interesting. All of these things, and now podcasts, is going to help me to help people. We're back to Deborah helps people. Teach them what brain plasticity is, how people go through it, and how I believe, and I truly believe this with all my heart, is that when the NFL players were not living, we don't want to go into how they demise themselves through concussions. With the military, and everybody's talking about it right now. I do believe a large percentage of them have my rare migraine, because you do not have to have, it does not develop through stress. There are other ways you can get it. and it is a rare migraine. At the time I got it, the CDC didn't even have anything about it, just some possibilities. Now it's listed as a rare migraine and a rare disease. And then the trigeminal neuralgia is the most severe thing, and you can get a concussion. And we didn't even go over the concussion. That'll be some other time. You can get a concussion that's so severe the trigeminal nerve will, and they play upon each other, and that makes it really severe to the point that you get depression. And I can see where some people who come back and from the military, and they're going, how can I live my life like this? How can I take care of my family? How can I do the things that I used to do? How can I shoot a gun anymore? This is so painful. How can I be the man I was? And then we know what happens to them. I'm just putting it out there because I have been doing a lot of research about that with military studies. I started my research back with the concussions with the MSL and stuff. And I had a doctor who was I ran into and for some surgery, and he was also had a thing in his office, and we talked that he was a particular doctor that examined NFL players to see what was wrong with them and stuff like that. So anyway, I think we are at the point of talking about brain plasticity, but I can't do it and just we've touched the edge of it. And when I say we touched the edge of it, is because we're in the year of 2026, numbers again, and I met Dr. Kaylin in 2010, so I got 16 years. So it doesn't come overnight. Some people it may, but no, it doesn't come overnight. It's a lot of work, and parents, it's a lot of work. Caretakers, it's a lot of work. They say there are other areas and diseases that, and I believe it, that the brain can be reshaped because they've come so far. It's amazing. It kind of reminds me of, and then I need to stop talking because once I get talking. But when I was a draftsman, I went through the series of CAD and all this other stuff and project management and everything. And I thought CAD was just going to be the miracle worker of a draftsman. Well, it still took the same old time, still everything. So brain plasticity, just because you start it, some people it can be, maybe a week or two, maybe this, that, the other. Or some people it may be years. Some people, it may be 20 years if you keep working on it. Just one day, something becomes unlocked. I shouldn't say one day, every day, something can become unlocked. I truly believe that. And thank you for listening to this. And I know it's been a long message, but you hadn't heard the half of my life, but that's a short story. Valerie, the one that takes the bull by the horn, and she grabbed me and said, we need your story out there.
Okay, and make sure you check out those advertisements after this. And look, if you want to be a sponsor and sponsor this podcast, if you want to be on this podcast, contact Deborah or myself, Valerie, and we'll work with you, okay? Till next week, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you for watching this podcast. Don't forget to go to www.deborahmarieofficial.com to review some of my life and also my products that I sell to health, brain, and spinal. And also, stay on here. You're going to see some wonderful advertisements after this show. Deborah loves you, and thank you for joining us.